Peace, ladies and gentlemen. I am Gandhi, your host for the Principles Over Profits podcast, and this is episode 10, which is titled Reappropriating Culture. What we're going to try to do is to define culture. Now, this attempt at giving a definition is not going to be comprehensive because culture is a very complex concept, but we'll use one of the anthropological definitions of culture. But before we get into the episode, I just wanted to clarify something. I struggled a little bit around 10 minutes and describing a particular component of culture, which is customs. Now, customs, quickly, would say that custom consists of, if you want to say, or custom does three things, and that it's regulative, it is constitutive, and it is prescriptive. So by regulative, by way of illustration, we'll say that it determines behavior, right? So it is customary in the American continent and so-called black culture that men who attend religious institutions for worship, etc., they take off their hats once they enter, and constitutive and as a norm, this type of act, right, what it would do is it counts as a form of respect. This is what this action means, the action of men taking off their hats when they enter religious institutions for worship. And prescriptive, it would be in the sense that this type of norm determines how men in this culture ought to act, how they have to act, right? So that they can be considered as respectful in that culture. Second and last clarification is around 31 and 33 minutes. And when I'm using Kendrick Lamar's They Not Like Us as an illustration of how culture is used for stratification. So what I wanted to say is that the they would represent the Drake and Drake's supporters who would be considered as outsiders, and the us would be Kendrick Lamar and his supporters who would be considered as insiders. So this is a way that culture is used as a means for stratification. Now, subscribe to the channel, click the notification button, comment, share so that we can grow. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am your host, Gandhi, and this is Principles Over Profits podcast, episode 10. Today's topic of discussion is going to be on the subject of culture. So the title is fitting, Reappropriating Culture. Obviously, I'm doing a play on this notion of cultural appropriation, but that is not going to be the topic of discussion. In fact, again, we're going to try to dig into the definition of the word and the concept so that we can, moving forward, right, and the upcoming episodes have some kind of ground or guideline by which we're going to ground, if you want to say, our future discussions. And also, I think it is beneficial to have some kind of definition of culture because when people are talking about culture and modern societies and everyday discussions, often if you pay attention, you'll notice that they're talking past each other. They don't quite have the same definition of culture. Therefore, it's very, difficult, right, for them to understand each other. And sometimes it's very difficult as a external, if you want to say, audience, right, or a witness of, these discussions to make sense of what is being said. And with that said, I prepared some notes so that we don't get sidetracked and we don't get lost, right? We're not going to freestyle today. So we're going into the etymology, if you want to say a brief etymology, which means the source, right, of the word culture. And then we'll jump into the concept and make some comments so that we can close the episode. So if you're new, welcome. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification button so that you can get notified once new episodes are released from this podcast or when we release other content. If you are a usual participator or member, if you're one of the holy ones, welcome back. And don't forget, again, to comment and share so that people, be aware, so that they can be aware of the podcast. So culture, in English and French, right, the most Latinized languages, it stems from a Latin word, cultus and also cultura, right? And what the word cultus means and cultura, right, in Latin, cultus is to care, or and it there's a relation with tilling the ground. So cultivation, right? So has to do with farming and taking care of land, right? This is the origin, or if you want to say the etymology of the word culture. In fact, there are other words that stem from this one term, cultus or cultura. For example, the word cult, right? When you a religious cult, you hear those terms. They all stem from that one word. In French, you'll have words like cultiver. And so there's a plethora of words that stem from that one word, culture. So with the etymology, we can see, if we stick to the etymology, right, we see, look, it has to do with farming and with taking care of the ground, or taking care of the produce of the ground, right? So like seeds that a planter plants, you take care of the ground to make sure that the ground blooms or render, you know what I mean, good produce. So conceptually now, okay, so when we use the term culture, moving forward into our time in English and French, it's a concept and it's an idea that consists of social behaviors, institutions, and norms, right? These things put together is what conceptually make the notion of or sustain, or if I were to say sustain, the notion of culture. So by social behavior, what we mean is modes of actions among various members of a group. And by institution, we are referring to formal or informal, regularized, structure of guidelines that shape and delimit social behavior. And by norms, right, which is another constituent of the concept or the idea of culture, we mean shared standard of acceptable behavior by a group or within a group. Now, it is important to say, you see, these notions such as social behavior, institution, and norms, they all overlap. It's not, we shouldn't see, culture as a stagnant, idea, right? There's a influx and interaction going back and forth of some of these components that I just mentioned. Now, social behavior, okay, and institution and norms, they relate to some other ideas, right, that coming together, this is what, if we want to say, produce the idea or the concept of culture. Or another way to put it, some of these other notions that I'm going to talk about there, which stems from social behavior and institutions and norms, they all together make up this notion of culture. Now, to have, or when we mention culture as conceptually, right, it stems from, knowledge, their beliefs, or should I say, instead of saying stemming, let us say that culture consists, as an idea or as a concept, it consists of knowledge, beliefs, arts, law, and customs. And by the way, this definition that I'm going by, they're not, it's not expansive, or it's not an all-conclusive, if you want to say, definition, because if you do a review of anthropologists and sociologists, you're going to find, as I said, various definitions. But I think what I'm going to describe today, you'll find some of these notions and most anthropological or sociological definition of culture. So let us get back. So components of this notion or idea of culture are, as I mentioned, knowledge, beliefs, art, law, and customs. By knowledge, what we mean is an awareness of facts, true beliefs, that are justified as opposed to mere opinions, right? And the source of this knowledge can be empirical, intuition, inference, testimonial, or memory. Now, by beliefs, what we imply is um, attitudinal, a mental state about the state of affairs and existence, or look, it's a disposition. But by belief, what we mean is a disposition that one may take towards the state of reality. So beliefs can be true or they can be false. Now, art is human creative expressions and practice. By law, which is another component that makes up this notion of or this concept of culture that we're trying to understand today, are sets of rules or sets of rules that are intended to regulate behavior. And then we have finally customs. Customs are regulative, constrained behavior, constitutive, which is descriptive norms that define activity. And then we have prescriptive, which are unwritten rules or ethics, meaning how members of a group or a society should or ought to act or behave. So custom, we basically broke it down into three, if you want to say, principles or other notions. Regulative, regulative, constitutive, I'm making some mistakes here. I'm reading my notes. So customs is regulative, descriptive norms, and prescriptive norms, right? That's these, I'll repeat again since I kind of batch this. So by regulative, customs are regulative in the sense that they constrain behavior. They're descriptive norms that define activities, right? Prescriptive, we're talking about unwritten laws or rules, should I say unwritten rules, actually, because we already talked about law that determine the way a member of a group or a society should or ought to act. Culture is acquired through enculturation and socialization. By enculturation, what we mean is it is the process of attaining values, norms, particular to a culture's worldview. It can happen through formal education or mimicry. By socialization, what we mean it is the process whereby one internalizes norms, ideologies that are necessary to integrate a society. And socialization leads to enculturation, and enculturation also can lead to socialization. So there's an interplay between those two notions there. It's not one that comes before the other, right? So let me give some examples, okay? So before I move on, okay, to, if you want to say, the third section of trying to define and understand this notion of culture. So to give some, by way of illustration, okay, so that we can flesh out some of these concepts. So this notion of knowledge, right? So groups of people, let me talk, for example, the country where I was born. So Haiti, for example, Haitians have, and that goes for every groups of people, every nation, okay? But I'll start with Haitians as an example. So Haitians have a particular worldview by which they look at or judge reality. Okay, remember we're talking, like, I'm trying to, if you want to say, flesh out, if you want to say, this notion of knowledge, right, which is a component of culture. Okay, so the Haitian worldview, okay, is very magical. So one of the ways, right, remember I mentioned that knowledge, one of the ways you can get knowledge is through, you could get empirical experience, right? You could have intuition, inference, testimony, memory. So in the Haitian worldview, because it is so magical, okay, most of the times, the knowledge, the way that Haitians in general, I'm talking in general here, right? The way that Haitians understand or think they understand, if you want to say the world that they find themselves in, it is mostly not through empirical, if you want to say, evidence, right? Sometimes by inference or by intuition. Why do I say this? Because um, Haitians will claim to know certain things based on, if you want to say, but it's not just Haitian, but I'm using Haitians as an example, based on tradition, for example. So and so said. My grandmama said, my grandpapa used to say, etc. And then if you have, if the grandpapa is or the grandmama is still alive and you have access to that person and you could question them about the tradition, if you want to say the source of the tradition, right, that they've passed on. Sometimes they also don't really have a way of explaining it, at least not in the way that we scientifically. By scientifically, I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying or implying that these individuals ought to be scientific. I'm just trying to show you how, for example, in general, in the Western world, right, we have a scientific worldview, a scientific way of understanding and describing our reality. And I'm saying that the modern state of Haiti, even though it is part of the modern, the greater Western bloc, it's right. But in general, Haitians, the way that they acquire their worldview is a magical worldview. So they don't use the same principles that exist in science, right, to determine, if you want to say, or acquire knowledge about reality. So I was giving an example, say in Haiti, how people will claim to know things about things based on tradition, based on what one said. So it could be a grandpa, a grandma, etc. And I was saying that when you go question, if you have access to the grandpa or the grandma, and you question them, the source of that knowledge that they've passed on, sometimes they can't explain it either. So I'm trying to show you how, for example, in Haiti, we're still talking about culture here. We're talking about the component of culture that is knowledge. I'm trying to show you how, in general, how Haitians, in general, their source of knowledge and their epistemology is one that is grounded in magic or mysticism. Okay. Therefore, that being said, right, beliefs, right, which is another component that we say that is in culture, so the Haitian belief, right, is based on the knowledge, right? So whether it's true or false, this is basically what I'm saying. So it remains to be seen, because some of these things need to be tested. Some of these knowledge or beliefs, now moving on, right, that Haitians in general hold, need to be tested so that we can know if they're true, at least by the scientific standard of the greater Western world. For example, of a belief, okay? Remember I said that the Haitian epistemology is rooted in mysticism, or it's magical, right? Therefore, their belief. So there is a belief, for example, there's an area in Haiti, right? In the western area of Haiti that they call Sodo. It's a waterfall. Now, generally, it is believed that this waterfall, the trees, the natural environment, okay, where you find this waterfall, is believed that it is an enchanted, in a sense, area. Why? Because remember, in general, I'm saying in general, because Haiti has different, if you want to say, religious systems, okay? You have Catholics, you have Protestants, etc., and so on. But in general, you can say that a high percentage of Haitian people are directly or indirectly practitioners of voodoo. So in the voodoo, if you want to say understanding, right, this area that I was talking about, there's an area called Sodo where there's this waterfall, that it is believed that this waterfall has magical properties and the trees, etc. Why? Because in Haitian voodoo, for example, there is this spirit, okay, that is called Dambala. And I'm not a how do you say, an expert, right, in the voodoo system, but I understand a bit. So Dambala is he's associated also to to water. So there's also this notion of this other law, this feminine. Dambala is a masculine spirit, and then there's a feminine spirit called Erzili. And Erzili, in fact, because Haiti, sometimes there's a syncretism, there's a mixture, if you want to say, of Christian, Catholic, and voodoo ideas, right, that join together to form, if you want to say, some of the Haitian beliefs. So this belief, so what I'm telling you, basically, this area, there's pilgrimage that people do, right? You even have Haitians that are in the diaspora, for example, outside of Haiti, in Miami, etc., New Jersey, Montreal, Canada, that will fly from where they are to go to Haiti in certain periods of the year so that they can go to that area, so that they can bathe in this, because again, they believe that this waterfall has magical properties. So you see, so this is one belief, for example, within the Haitian culture that is based on the magical epistemology, all right, or worldview, a way of understanding, or a way of constructing, if you want to say, their understanding of reality. Okay. Now, arts, remember we talked about arts, which is a human creative expression and practice. So remember, we're talking about the knowledge, right? Or the source of knowledge, the Haitian epistemology. From the epistemology, you have beliefs, and then again, it's not in this order, but this is in the order that I'm putting it. So then in the art, for example, and Haitian music, there are certain rhythms that are informed by, if you want to say, the voodoo belief system, right? For me not to say religion, because some of voodoo practitioners will tell you it is not a religion, etc. But this is a matter for another discussion. So there are certain rhythms, right? Especially, with the drum, etc., that come from the religious belief system of voodoo. There are also what you call paintings, for example, right? There's a system, like there are these geometrical figures that are used in Haitian painting art, right? That also originate from this voodoo belief system, okay, or religious system. Now, remember I said there's also the component of law, which is a set of rules that are intended to regulate behavior. In general, Haitian law, if you want to talk about the country itself, it's pretty much, it's rooted, if you want to say, in European, if you want to say, notions of law. But, so suffice it to say, in light of what we're discussing right now, because of the worldview, right, that Haitians have within these sets of rules that are intended to regulate behavior, which are laws, right, you'll find some of these beliefs that we just talked about that are rooted in this magical worldview. Now, customs, finally. Remember I said customs, there's a regulative component to custom. There's a constitutive, I said descriptive earlier, but it's constitutive component, and there's a prescriptive component, right? So the customs are regulative, as we say, right? Because they're made to constrain, if you want to say, behavior. Remember, the laws are sets of rules that are intended to regulate behavior. The customs, they constrain, or as you say, constrained. By constraint means the customs determine how people behave. But now see this, right? See, the customs will stem also, or will have their basis within the worldview and the beliefs of the people or the members of the group that practice them. So in Haiti, you have certain customs, right, that I don't have a particular idea or example in mind, but just like in the United States or in Canada, there are customs, right, that also emerges from their belief system. It's the same thing. And if you want to say Haitian culture. Now, remember, I said culture is acquired through enculturation and socialization. And I said in enculturation and socialization, there is an interplay between those two concepts, right? So, and I said enculturation, for example, you can enculturate through formal education or through mimicry. By formal education, now by way of example, we can say, look, when I moved to the United States as a young kid, coming from Haiti, right, in the United States, going to school, I was in ESL because in the beginning my English was very poor. So ESL was English as a second language. So see, I went to school to formally learn the language, the grammar, the vocabulary, etc. But I also learned the language not just formally, through school. I also learned it because I had cousins. I still have cousins who were American born and American raised, who I lived with and that I interacted with, right? So, and how they spoke English, I learned by mimicking them. I also learned by mimicking TV shows. For example, What's Happening. We used to watch What's Happening, The Cosby Show, etc. Right? That was in the 80s. So mimicry also was in the neighborhood. The kids we would play with, the way they spoke. You mimic how the intonations, etc. So that's a way we talk about enculturation, and also by virtue of what I just spoke about, how, for example, we interacted with the children in the neighborhood. That's a form of socialization. There's also socialization in terms of within a family structure. So say my uncle who moved to the United States and early or mid 70s, who raised children who were born in the United States, they through living with them, right, I was being socialized into, if you want to say, the American way of life. My apologies. I have to look at my notes, like I said, so that I don't deviate. So something that I mentioned in the last episode, right, episode 8 and 9 on hip hop, I said culture is not static. So it's important to remember that culture changes and it is reshaped, right? And that is usually provoked internally through friction of dynamic pushing forward and backward, of if you want to say a conservative and progressive strains, if you want to say, within the culture, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So I'm saying within a culture, you'll have components. The components could be ideas. Ideas obviously are manifested or actualized by people. So you have conservative ideas, and I don't mean this politically. And then you have progressive, ideas that are interacting with each other, and they are in friction with each other, that are causing cultural change. So culture is, in that sense, I'm trying to explain to you that culture is not static. Lastly, for this episode, okay, before we conclude, culture. So remember I said by definition, I explained earlier in the beginning that culture, the etymology, right? It comes from cultus, cultura in Latin, and had to do with tilling the ground, tilling the ground, which had to do with farming, right? So one of the purpose, if you want to say, of culture, okay, excuse me, it's culture, part of what culture, apart from giving meaning, right, meaning to our lives, right, to the members of a group, what culture also does is what we call stratify, right? So they're what you call cultural stratification. So by cultural stratification, let me read my notes actually, so I don't go ahead. Stratification is the arrangement or classification of something into groups, which basically you'll have. So here's an example again. Let's go to California, for example, LA. So we know in general, LA is divided between different factions, right? So you have Bloods, you have Crips, you have the Mexican gangs, right? SAs, Serranos, and Norteños, Northerners and Southerners. So stratification, this is a form of stratification. So each of these, I gotta be careful here. So the term that the way that I'm describing culture right now, okay, I'm gonna use the term culture here to talk about, so these gangs, they're subcultures within Just like hip hop, I mentioned in the last episode, is a subculture within Greater American. So these gangs, howbeit generally they're involved into criminal activities, right, or illegal activities, but nonetheless they're part of American culture. So I'm trying to explain to you what we mean by the purpose of culture. One of the purpose of culture is to stratify. So by stratification, what we mean is we say that it's an arrangement or classification of something into groups. So in Los Angeles, you have these various factors, right? You'll have the so-called blacks that are divided. I'm generalizing. Obviously, it's not all blacks that are into the gang subculture, but I'm using that as an example to explain the purpose of culture. And one of the purposes being stratification. So within the blacks, you'll have they're divided between Bloods and Crips, red and blue. Same thing within the Mexican or the Hispanic, right? The Mexicans and the Honduran, the Guatemalans, El Salvadorians, etc., among themselves and other, ethnic groups that I'm not privy of, or that's not basically necessary to get into right now. Within themselves, also they're divided between Northerners and Southerners. So each of these groups, right, they have everything that we talked about earlier to also, or if not everything, they have some of these components, right? Knowledge, belief, arts, law, customs. So they too have a culture. So this is another way, see? I'm saying there's what I would call the main definition, right? Of the concept or the idea of culture. And there is also other, if you want to say, ways in which we use the word culture. For example, and explaining cultural stratification in California, I'm saying that, so for the Bloods, for example, there's a particular blood culture. There's a particular Crip culture, right? There's a Sureños culture. But this is using the term loosely here, but I want to constrain the term so that we can deal with the essence, if you want to say, of the idea or the concept before we start delving into these different levels of usage, of the term or the concept. So anyways, all of this is to explain what we mean by culture serves as stratification. So this is how through a culture, one who adheres to a culture by practicing the components or the elements of this culture, it determines if you're part of the culture also. Right, so that's what we mean by stratification. This is how you have the in and out. For example, Kendrick Lamar's "They Not Like Us." The "us" implies there's a lot of implication behind it. Again, the purpose of this episode is not to do an analysis or a deep analysis of the meaning of "they not like us," but I can say for sure by the title alone, "they not like us," the us as opposed to them. So that's what stratification is. And perhaps I should have simplified. To simplify it, "they not like us" implies that the people who are part of the "they" are different than the others. The others, I guess, would mean Drake, the Drake fans, and the people who think like Drake. I don't think it's Canadian. I don't, in a sense, because Kendrick has fans in Canada, right? So these fans also would be part of the Kendrick inner circle. So whatever the "they" implies, whatever culture that Kendrick implies, right? By the "they," those who are part of that "they," there's a way that they're supposed to think, act, etc., see the world. Okay, so this is all to explain the purpose of culture. That's what one of the things that culture does. It stratifies. It helps determine who belongs in a sense. Now, stratification in of itself is not problematic. It's not negative or positive, right? It can become detrimental when this is how it happens. It becomes detrimental once it is transformed, or it transforms itself into tribalism. So again, it's not an issue that obviously we're all different. We're all unique in our ways. So that's not a problem. However, we're also all human, right? So as human, we all belong, if you want to say, to the human race. But by virtue of the geographical locations we were born in, or that we're in, by virtue of the ideas and ideologies and the beliefs, right, that we adhere to, these things will determine what groups or tribes, if you want to say, that we belong to. Tribalism now, as a term, right? What we mean by tribalism, we don't just mean that, oh, you're part of a tribe. Then that would not be a problem. By tribalism, as a technical term, it's the tendency to identify with and show preference for one's group at the expense of another. So racism, for example, would be an extreme negative form of tribalism. So this is to explain how stratification or cultural stratification in and of itself is not negative. It only becomes problematic if it's transformed into tribalism. And I'm saying that racism is an extreme form of tribalism. I'm going to stop there, okay? So next episode, maybe we'll try to flesh out a little bit further how, now that I hope that we somewhat have, a framework, like a definition of what we mean by culture. We can use that definition now to start discussing, for example, the relationship of the diverse groups within, for example, the American nation, the US of A, or Canada, or Haiti, or wherever, right? We can also use that definition to discuss this notion of hip hop more in depth, right? Because now we have somewhat of a definition. Let me do a quick recapitulation, okay? We're saying that culture is an idea or a concept, right, which stems from the root of the word itself etymologically is from Latin, curtus or cultura. It has to do with care, more specifically with taking care or tilling the ground. So there's a farming component to it, right? And we're saying that conceptually, though, what we mean, okay, today, when we use the notion or the term culture as an idea, it's the sets of social behaviors and institutions and norms that all comes together, okay? And these, if you want to say, components together, they're informed by other, if you want to say, principles, such as notions of knowledge, beliefs, art, law, and customs. These things in relation with each other are what constitute this concept of culture that we're trying to deal with, okay, in this episode. And again, moving forward, we also talked about how culture is acquired through enculturation and socialization. And we described what enculturation was. Enculturation, you can basically become encultured, right? Enculturation, as the word means, formally by formal education, like by going to school, etc., or it could be through mimicry and through socialization. I've also discussed the purpose. One of the purposes of culture, as I said, is to give meaning, right, to people. Right, and one of these, if you want to say, components in giving meaning is cultural stratification, which briefly we said is basically, you could say it this way, okay? Simply, stratification is when you have N people or members of a group who are considered to be N, and then you have others who are external to that group. So that's one of the purpose of culture. So we'll stop there with this episode. I trust that, again, I did justice. If you need to, go back and, watch this video again. And moving forward, we're going to use this definition so that we can have greater discussions even about some of the stuff in the Bible great, which again is really my field of study, my expertise, right? The history, if you want to say, of the ideas in the Bible and in the ancient Near East. And also we can talk about a lot, if you want to say, of the issues or conflicts and controversies in popular culture, because a lot of them have to do with culture and our understanding or misunderstanding of culture. So we end this segment of this discussion of reappropriating culture, which was the title. We'll come back next time and we'll go a little bit further. And again, press the notification button, subscribe if you haven't, share this episode and share the channel. And let me know in the comment what you think. Let me know where it is you think I can improve. Let me know what your understanding of culture is. And let me know what you would like to discuss anyway. In light of this greater discussion that we're having about defining the concept of culture, let me know what other topics, that relates to this notion that you would like for us to talk about. So I'm Gandhi the Zoe, Principles of a Prophets podcast. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.